Hello everyone, what's up? Today in this video I am going to show you another block example. In my previous example I showed you how to parse JSON from API using the block pattern. Today we are going to use the Firebase. We are going to authenticate user, register user, login user, logout user, and Firebase auth kind of stuff. So let's get started. So if you don't know how to add Firebase in your project, I have made a video on this. You can check that out. I'll put the link in the description. So now let's look at the app that we are going to create today. Initially, we will have a splash screen, and then we'll have a login screen and a sign up screen. And here we can sign up our user using their email and password. I am creating an user with a random value. So I'm creating an user with a random email and password. Click on the sign up button. As you can see, user creation is successful and we are navigated to the home page. There is a simple text field with the email of the user, and then this one to log out the user. If we click on this, our user will be logged out and will be navigated to the sign up screen. So this will be the final app that we are going to create today. So let's get started. First of all, let's look at the pubspec YAML file. I am using this Firebase auth package, equatable package. This is not mandatory, but good to use. And then the Flutter block package and meta package to make some field required. So let's start coding. First of all, let's create the user repository. For that, I am going to create a folder inside the lib folder, repositories, and here let's create user repository dart class dart file repository. Okay, here we'll create a repository class. User repository, and of course we need a Firebase auth instance here. So for that, let's create an auth instance, Firebase auth, and we'll initialize this instance inside the constructor. So initialize the instance Firebase auth. Okay, now we'll create for the possible use cases. Now think about the use cases we're gonna have. First of all, we need to create an user using their password and email. So for that, let's create a method for that. Sign up with email, or create user, and this will take a email and a password. Email string password, and this will return us a future value of Firebase user. So our return type is Firebase user, and as it is going to return us a future value, we need to make it asynchronous. So use the async keyword. Now time to create the user. So for that, use the firebase auth instance, firebase auth dot create user with email and password. Really simple. And the email is this email, and this is the password. And in this way we will create our user. Now look at the return type of this method. This is going to return a future value, which is auth result. So of course we need to await here. It store the result, and then we need to return the user from this auth result. So we can return result dot user. Simple, really simple. Now there is some possibility of getting exception. There may be internet connection exception or any other exception. So it's good to put this code in a try catch block. So use a try catch block here, and catch the exception. So this is the method to create our Firebase user. Now to make it more specific, we can specify the exception that we're gonna get. If there is any Firebase exception or internet connection exception, that will throw a platform exception. So for that, we can mention it here, platform exception, and then we'll throw that exception. We'll throw exception with a message. Now let's create a method to sign in our user, and similarly it will be a future. Return time will be a future, and it will return a Firebase user. So method name sign in with email and password, or simply can say sign in user, and it will take a email and password as parameter. Then just like the user creation, it will return a Firebase auth result, Firebase result object. So use the Firebase auth instance, Firebase auth dot sign in with email and password, this one. Now mention the email and password here. Really simple. You can see it is returning an auth result object. So we need to await here, as it is returning a future. Of course we need to make it asynchronous. Done. Now we can return our user. So simply return result dot user. This is another use case. We have method to register user, to sign in user. Also we need to sign out the user. So let's create a method for that. Sign out won't return anything, so that will be a future and future of void. And of course it will be an asynchronous method. firebase-auth dot sign out. Simple. So this is the third method inside our repository class. What else we do need? We need to check whether the user is already signed in or not. So for that, let's create another method. That will of course return a future, and return type will be a boolean value, true for signed in user and false for not signed in user. So is signed in. Dot current user. This will return a Firebase user object if the user is signed in. So this is if this returns a user object, then user is signed in, or if it is null, then the user is not signed in. So this is the logic, and we can return the boolean value current user not null. It will return true if the user is signed in, false if he is not signed in. Now what else we do need? We may need to get the current user. So for that we can create another method. Because the previous methods, it will return a future of Firebase user object. Get current user, asynchronous method, and return the currently signed in user. Firebase auth dot current user. That's all. So that's all about our possible use cases in the app. We have created a method to register user, sign in user, sign out user. We are checking whether user is signed in or not. Also, we have created a method to get the current user. So that's all about the repository class. Now let's move on to the block classes. So for block classes, let's create a folder. Inside the lib folder, blocks. We will have our blocks inside this folder. Now, what are the possible blocks for this app? First of all, we need to check whether the user is signed in or not. We need to check the authentication. So for that, let's create a block for that. That block will be auth block. Auth block. Let's create an event for the auth block. We can name it as auth event. Need the state class as well, auth state. And finally the auth block.dart. Now if you have not haven't known if you don't know much about block, I will suggest you to watch my previous video on block, which was about parsing JSON from API. So you can watch it. Now what are the possible events here? Now first of all, let's create an abstract block event class. Abstract is going to extend the equivalable class. Now when we open our app, let's check it. When we open our app, it will check Let's check once again. It will check whether the user is authenticated or not, and during that time, as you can see, there was a splash screen. In the meantime, it will show a splash screen, and then on the base of the authentication state, it will return a login screen or home page screen. So initially we need to check the auth state. So for that, I will create an event here. Name it as app started event, and extend the auth event as start class. So that's it. That's the auth event class here. Now create the state class. Of course, we need to create an abstract class for the state. We can name it as auth state. It's gonna extend the equatable class. Now, what are the events? Simply, there will be three states. One for the initial state, another for the authenticated state, and if the authentication is not returns false, then there will be an unauthenticated state. So three state for now. Let's create the classes for the three states. Auth initial state, authenticated, and another one unauthenticated. So these are the possible three states. Now let's, as we are using equatable, we need to overwrite a method. Now initially we don't need any field here in the initial state, but if the state is authenticated, then we need to handle a Firebase user. So let's have a field Firebase user, and to make it required, we need to meta.dart package. We need to use this package, and let's make the user object required authenticated state. This dot user, and we don't need to use anything here in the unauthenticated state. Now move to the block classes, block class, auth block class. First of all, let's import the block.dart, and then let's create a block class auth block, which will extend block, and we need to mention the event and state here. Auth event, auth state, and then we need to override two methods. And again, I have explained all of this in my previous video on BLoC. If you have not watched it, I recommend you to watch it. I'll put the link in the description. So we need a repository object here and dependency on repository. So have a user repository object, user repository, and we will initialize it inside the constructor. So for simplicity, I am just initializing it inside the constructor of the Bloc class. Now initial state, for initial state, if you can remember, we have created an state, auth initial state. We need to return that state from here, auth initial state, and inside this method we need to check the event first, though there is only a single event, app started event, and of course we need to make it asynchronous. Let's first check the event. If event is app started event, then what do we need? We need to check whether the user is signed in or not. Initially, when the app started, first we need to check if the user is signed in or not. So let's check it. Is signed in. It will return a future. So for that, using await and user repository dot is signed in. If it is signed in, it will return a true value, or else it will be false. So let's check if it is true or false. If is signed in is true, that means our user is already authenticated, already signed in. Then you need to return the authenticated state. And also we need to get the user. If you can remember, we have created a method inside the repository to get the user. User repository dot get current user. It will return a user object, and then we can yield the appropriate state here, which is authenticated state. Authenticated state, and it needs a user object. Done. So if it is signed in, then this state will be yielded. If the user is not signed in, then we need to yield another state, which is unauthenticated state. Now, of course, there may be some error, internet connection error or any other error. So for that, to be in the safe side, let's put it in a try catch block. And if there is any error, we need to yield the this state. So that's all about the auth block. We have event, a single event, app started event, and then we have three possible states: initial, authenticated, and unauthenticated. And inside the Bloc class, we are having a user repository, and initially auth initial state is returned from here, initial state, and we are checking the event and then yielding appropriate state. So that's all about auth block. Now what else we do need? We have created the auth block. We also need a block to user registration, a block for user registration. So let's create it. Let's create a folder first inside the blocks folder. That will be reg for registration, reg block. Am I in the correct folder? Yes, this one. So let's create the event class first. User reg event and user reg block. So 3 files, one for event, one for state, and the other one for block. Now, what is the event, what are the states, and what about the block class? Let's talk about it. So in the sign up screen, if you can see here, in the sign up screen, we have two buttons, one for sign up and the other one to navigate to the simple one, to navigate to the login screen. I will use the is BLoC for the sign up button. So just ignore this one. This is simple navigation code here. We don't need to use the BLoC. So in the sign up screen, we have a sign up button. So we can think about a single event here. So let's create the abstract class first. This will extend the equatable, and then the event class, which is sign up button pressed event. Quite long name, but then again continue it. Which will extend the user rank event Okay, so when the user sign up button will be clicked, we need email and password. So make them required here. String email and password. To make them required, we need to import the meta package. So that's all about the event class. Now move to the state class. What are the possible state here? There will be of course an initial state, a loading state. When this button will be clicked, then it will take some time, of course, and then we need to show a progress indicator here. So there will be a loading state, and then user creation may be successful or maybe failure. So another two state for the success and failure. So first of all, let's create the abstract class. User reg state is gonna extend the equatable, and then an initial class. So these are the possible states. Now let's override the methods of equatable class. Now initially inside the initial state we don't need to handle any field. In the loading state, same here, we don't need to handle anything. And then when the user registration is successful, we need to pass a user object to the home page. So let's have a user field here, Firebase user, and make it required inside the constructor. And if the user registration is successful, we need to user registration is failure, then you need to show the reason of the failure, an error message, string message make it required. So that's all about the state: user registration, initial, loading, successful, and failure. Now let's move to the user registration block class. First of all, import the block.dart and then create the class user registration block. You can extend the block class and you need to mention the event and then the state. Let's override two methods, and just like the previous block, we have a dependency here on user repository. Initialize it. So for simplicity, I'm initializing it inside the constructor and creating user repository in every block class. We can create a single user repository inside the main.dart and make them pass all through the tree, down the tree. But for simplicity, I am creating user repository in every block class and initializing them inside the constructor. Now, in the initial state, we need to return the user rec initial, this one, and here we need to make it asynchronous, and then check about the event, though there is a single event. If the event is sign up button pressed event, maybe there is a typo. So if this is the event, then initially when the user when the sign up button is clicked, there will be a loading indicator. So for that, we will yield the this one, maybe typing mistake once again. Just copy this. So initially there will be the loading state, and then try to sign up the user using the repository. So user, you need to await user repository dot create user email. We need the email and password. So the email and password will be provided from the event dot email event dot password. So this will return a user object. Now we can yield the successful state, which is this one. This requires user. Just pass the user that we just created. So these are the code. If the user creation is successful, maybe there are some error. So for that, use the try catch block. Put the code inside the try block and catch the error. If error occurs, then you're gonna yield the error state. User, what's the name? User rank failure. And message, get the message from the object. And of course we can handle the error more efficiently. We can show the appropriate message. If you look at the repository, we are simply showing the exception message, but of course we can handle it more efficiently. We can show the appropriate message, whether the internet connection error or whether the specific Firebase error. We can show it more nicely, but I'll do it later. But for now, just use the e.toString. So that's all about the user registration block class. So we have created two block file, one for auth block, another one for registration block, and also we do need another block which is login block. I think my video is already too long. I'll complete it in the next video. So that's all about in this video. This is the part 1. There will be a part 2. So don't forget to watch that as well. So thanks all for watching. If you don't like what you saw, then please do subscribe to my channel and have a good day.